to focus on the differences between them when it comes to policy? My guess is the answer is no, but at least I can ask for it. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Banfield starts.
Breaking news out of Orange County Courthouse in Florida. We've got a verdict that has just come down in the Sarah Boone Suitcase murder trial. Want to guess what she got? There you go. Convicted of the top count against her second-degree murder. And in case you were wondering, wait, didn't they just go out to deliberate? Yes, they did. And they did this fast. It was exactly 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 38 seconds. That's how long it took a unanimous jury to say Sarah Boone is a liar. She's a liar and she's a murderer. And for that, when she is sentenced, the very minimum will be 22.5 years to life. No chance for parole before 22 and a half years. That is if you behave well in prison and get that shot at parole. And that's no guarantee. So she is looking at the next 2 decades plus behind bars. Boy, I bet she wishes she took that deal at the beginning of her trial. When the prosecutor said, hey, how about 15 and we call it a day? And she said, nope. I think she figured she was smarter than everybody. Remember, this is the woman who zipped her boyfriend, George Torres, into a suitcase, beat him. It was a soft-sided suitcase. She beat him with a baseball bat as he was crouched in that suitcase, trying to breathe. And then she did this. She videotaped him as he was suffocating and begging to be let out because he couldn't breathe. And she swore at him in her drunken slur. And then he was dead the next morning. And when the police came, she said, it was all just a game and I just accidentally fell asleep. And then during trial, it was, I couldn't let him out because he would have killed me and I was defending myself. And the jury said, hogwash. Hogwash. Again, 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 38 seconds is all it took for this jury to say what I've been saying all along. That woman is a hideous liar, and now I can officially say she is a hideous murderer. And George Torres, bless your heart in heaven, but your murder has been avenged. Who knows where this goes from here in terms of appeals, because you know this lady gonna appeal. She blew through 9 attorneys on her way to this catastrophic defense. Get what you pay for. We have got a lot more coverage coming up, and I'm going to play that verdict. I'm going to play that moment for you in just a moment as well. But because it is also Friday night, what a week it's been, huh? Weeks behind us. Not for me yet. I got another 57 minutes. But I don't know how this week was for you, but for a couple of middle-aged guys in California, this was the best week ever. Best week they've seen in at least 30 years. I know you probably don't think of them as middle-aged, but Eric and Lyle Menendez have been locked up a long time. Both are serving life, no parole, for using shotguns to kill their parents back in 1989. They are 53 and 56 years old, respectively. And as I'm sure you know by now, parole is suddenly on the table for the brothers, thanks to the LA County DA, a man named George Gascon. Maybe we shouldn't really be stunned by this. Maybe not. Because in 2021, Gascon formed a unit, an entire unit in his office, dedicated to resentencing. And so far, more than 300 inmates have had their sentences reduced. And yesterday, he said it is Lyle and Eric's turn.
And I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. But they went to prison for life without the possibility of parole, which meant that certainly under the law at that time, they had no hopes of ever getting out. They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to live the life of the prison. But they never did that. To the contrary, even though they didn't think that they would ever be let free, they engaged in a different journey. A journey of redemption and a journey of rehabilitation.
Gascon says politics, specifically the upcoming election, where he is trailing in the polls, did not enter into his thinking, nor did those blockbuster Netflix shows that brought the Menendez saga to a whole new generation. Instead, he said he considered the following: the brothers' ages at the time of the killings. They were 18 and 21. The, quote, pre-conviction trauma that wasn't considered at the time. The number of years that the brothers have already served. And strong evidence of rehabilitation. Lyle just earned his bachelor's degree, for example, and both brothers have pages and pages of real and impactful community service while locked up. Bottom line, Gascon wants the court to throw out their no parole life sentences in favor of 50 years to life. And under California law, that would make them eligible for parole because they were under the age of 26 when they offended, and they've already served 30 years. Before you think done deal, hold up. Gascon's petition, just like the brothers' petition a year ago, now has to go before a judge. And that judge could grant it or not grant it. And if the judge does grant it, then the brothers go before a parole board, a board that could free them or not free them. Conceivably, the brothers could get different decisions, like one free, one not free. If one or both get paroled, well, then California's governor, Gavin Newsom, could step in and overrule it. This whole process is likely to take months, but my first guest tonight is smiling anyway because it's been a pretty great week for her firm. Alexandra Kazarian represents Eric and Lyle alongside our pal Mark Garagos, and it is her signature on the document that's going to the judge. So congratulations are due. Obviously, this has been long fought on your part, on Mark's part, and obviously the Menendez brothers' part. What are the chances, though, that the judge greenlights this?
I think the chances are good now that we have a recommendation from the DA. And I think the DA gave a conservative recommendation, which is, a little bit disappointing because we were hoping that it might be a recommendation of time served. But I think the fact that it was a conservative recommendation helps give the judge the ability to grant it without really making too many waves.
So George Gascon's office, there are many people in that office. He admits there are many people in that office that oppose his move here. And then we've heard homicide prosecutors in the past from that office say that they feel that there is a majority within that DA's office that opposes this. And I see you tilting your head. What do you say to that?
I don't know if there's a majority. I know that all of the prosecutors that are still at the DA's office who worked on the Menendez case, on the convictions, are opposed to this because how could you not be? How could you be somebody that argued to 48 people because there were two different trials, two different times? So you argued to 48 people that these two people should be put to death. They sought the death penalty. So everyone that worked on this case tried to get the death penalty for these two people. And now seeing that they have what looks like been redeemed, that they have turned their lives around, that they have been exemplary, probably the best prisoners that have ever come out of the California penitentiary system. How do you resolve those two things? I asked 48 people essentially to kill these two brothers, and now they've redeemed themselves. I don't know how you sleep at night knowing those two things. So I understand why people who worked on the case would be opposed to the idea that they are redeemed or that they should be released.
Let me ask you this. I know that you have a lot of family members of the Menendez brothers in your corner, family members of the deceased, of both mom and dad, right? Jose and Kitty's own family members, siblings. But there is one who stands out. His name is Uncle Milton. And he filed a very powerful amicus brief today. I read it. It's strong. And it sounds like he is holding nothing back. Do you think it is powerful enough to be a hurdle or a roadblock here?
He filed an amicus brief in the habeas petition, and we are now in resentencing. So the habeas is on hold. The resentencing is what matters. So that is
weirdly. I talked to his attorney, and that's coming up, Alexandria. And I asked, "Are you? I was talking about this particular track, which is now. I think we're on 30 days or so. Maybe the judge will hold a hearing on it. Maybe the judge won't hold a hearing on it, but is certainly going to take all of this under advisement." I asked her about that, and it seemed as though this is what they were fighting. This track.
She may be confused because she filed it in the habeas, which is in front of Judge Ryan. And we don't know who we're going to be in front of, but it's a separate track.
Okay. Well, and she didn't say that at 90 years old he's going to stand up and actually be there, but she did say he wants to be heard. She also had a lot of, the lawyer for this 90-year-old Uncle Milton had a lot of concerns that the DA hadn't really taken his concerns into account, hadn't reached out to him, hadn't let him know about any of this. And he found out on TV like the rest of us. Can I ask you this? Let's say that the judge does grant this resentencing. Do you have any concerns about the parole board saying, too bad?
Well, we never know what anybody's going to do. And we've represented people before on resentencings. We've represented people who have been granted parole by the parole board and they've been blocked by the governor. But there's always something else that can happen. There's always, if they are eligible and if they truly deserve to be released, then they will be. And so we believe that's going to happen. Exactly how it's going to happen, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. They're coming out.
Okay, and then what about that next layer of thick politics, and that's Gavin Newsom. I remember talking to somebody about the parole board in New York when it came to John Lennon's killer, and they said no one's ever going to be the one to say we're going to let him out. I wonder if there's any concern for Gavin Newsom, who'd say I'm not going to be the guy that lets the Menendez brothers out. Do you have that concern at all?
There's always a concern that when we get to the next step, it's not going to go the way we want. But if he does that, there are things that we do, that we take steps we take the next step and we get them out. We will get them out. So if somebody has an issue and raises a blockade along the way, it's just another step. But I believe wholeheartedly that everyone ultimately will see, especially after looking at everything that they've done while they've been incarcerated, everyone will see that it's time, that they've served enough time. The family members are the victims here, and the family members believe that they should be out. And there's nothing under the law that should keep them in.
Alexander Kazarian, thanks for doing this late on a Friday night after such a busy week, and congratulations are due for you and for Mark Garagos. And I don't care what people say across the country if they don't agree with this or if they do. It's good lawyering. So period, end of sentence. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you on. We'll have you back again, of course. And folks, if you follow the Menendez saga on social media, you're going to know, right? There's an outsized support for letting the brothers go free. But TikTok isn't all of America. And on the street and across this country, the opinions are kind of all over the map. Take a look.
At the end of the day, murder is murder. They did the crime. They got to do the time. Do I think the trial would have been different if it was set today? And maybe, they probably could have had a stronger case on their end with all the technology we have today. But still, I don't think even if it was today, murder is murder.
I believe that the Menendez brothers should be freed or at least retried. A lot of substantial evidence was not shown in court that definitely could have changed the verdict of the whole situation. All of the abuse that they suffered was not brought to light in court, and I just don't think that's fair. I think they spent more than enough time in prison, and life behind bars with no chance of parole is just not right.
And yes, the Menendez brothers should be free. The damage that sexual abuse does, it doesn't just disappear. It breaks people. It warps minds. It destroys any sense of safety. These guys didn't just snap out of nowhere either. They were products of unimaginable trauma. And if this happened today with what we know now about abuse, they'd never have gotten life in prison. Hell, if it were Layla and Erica in their shoes, the courts would have seen them more as victims, not monsters.
I think it sets a bad precedent. I think now everyone who's got similar circumstances is going to have to be looked at, and people are going to be calling for that. And in this day and age, if they were to be tried now, they would probably be found not guilty. We have a very sympathetic and a very sensitive society right now.
Do I think the Menendez brothers should be free? To me, it's less of a question about whether they should be free, and it's more of a question of, did they get a fair trial? And for that, I would have to answer no, I don't think that they did. We know in the first trial, it was declared a hung jury, and more than half the jury, I believe, thought that if they were found guilty, it should be manslaughter. So I think the resentencing does make sense because as we've learned more about the case, evidence that wasn't included in the second trial, I think that this is the right recommendation by the DA.
I think the Menendez brothers should have been released years ago. Instead of intensive care and therapy, they were put behind bars for years. It's unfathomable, the trauma they were put through. My generation has a much higher understanding of how that can alter a person. And personally, I think social media can highly impact us in a better direction versus 20 years ago. It's a different time, and we need to get with the program.
I'm not excusing what they did, but I think that they felt they had no other choice. In my opinion, a good comparison is Gypsy Rose. She was just released after being involved in her mother's murder due to the abuse that she endured. If she's free, I believe the Menendez brothers deserve that same consideration. Honestly, after their first trial, they should have only been convicted of manslaughter anyways, which would have seen them out years ago. After 35 years in prison, I think they deserve a chance at parole while still being held accountable for what they did.
Pretty interesting. You know, Eric and Lyle Menendez may be so close to freedom that they can taste it, but there is one man who could stand in their way. One very, very old man. He's not a judge, he's not a prosecutor, and he does not sit on the parole board. He is the 90-year-old brother of Kitty Menendez, and he is putting up a fight. Uncle Milton's attorney joins me next. It's not just Eric and Lyle Menendez and their lawyers who think that the pair has been locked up long enough. It is also a legion of supporters on TikTok and Instagram and a sizable group of legitimate allies, too, including at least 2 corrections officers, the district attorney of Los Angeles, and well over a dozen relatives of the victims, like close relatives of Jose and Kitty Menendez. But then there is also Milton Anderson, Uncle Milton. He is the 90-year-old brother of Kitty Menendez, and Uncle Milton does not believe that Eric and Lyle were molested by his sister's husband, Jose. Uncle Milton thinks the boys killed their parents out of greed, and he is fighting this DA's push for resentencing on the DA's own turf, the courtroom. Earlier, I spoke with Kathy Cady, the attorney for Uncle Milton. Ms. Cady, thanks for joining me. I'm so curious about your client, Milton Anderson. I know that he had a brother who died in 2017 who shared his opinion that the Menendez brothers were not innocent. Is Milton Anderson the only Menendez family member now who opposes this resentencing?
Well, he's the only one, certainly, who's willing to speak up. And he's the only person for whom I am speaking. I can't speak about other family members, but I don't know that any of the family members actually have an opinion that the brothers are innocent. It's my understanding that the other family members just think that they should be released or have an opportunity for a release. And certainly Mr. Anderson does not believe that they were innocent. He knows that they murdered his sister, Kitty, and her husband.
And I think you're right. The word isn't innocent. It's more not guilty of perhaps first-degree murder with a sentence of life, no parole. That seems to be where the discrepancy is. But I'm still trying to get my head around how Jose's own sister, Marta, and Kitty's sister, Joan, that's Milton's sister as well, and about 29 or so other family members all feel differently than Milton. Does he know something that they don't know? Where is the disconnect? And do they at all speak?
So what I can say, so I was a prosecutor for 30 years and certainly have experience in what happens in families or what can happen in families when you have a murder that occurs in the family. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for there to be somewhat of a rift, and that appears to be what happened in this case. I'm not here to talk about how the other people feel, and they certainly are justified in however they feel regarding this case. But what I know is that Milton Anderson stands firm in his belief that he doesn't think that Eric or Lyle were molested. He believes that the motive for the murder was absolutely greed, and that the murder was only committed after the brothers learned that they were going to be taken out of the will, and that they killed their parents because they wanted to still be able to inherit millions of dollars.
So Uncle Milton, as the boys would have called him, he visited Eric and Lyle in jail after their arrest. When did things change, and why did things change?
Well, I'm not able to go back to 30-some years ago to say exactly when that occurred. What I can say is that Mr. Anderson, it's his firm belief that the allegations of molestation were essentially concocted by the defense attorney, Leslie Abramson, and he believes that molestation did not occur. And furthermore, there were two witnesses that the brothers asked to come into court and lie at the trial. And one of them was a woman, a friend of the boys, who they asked to come in and say that she had been raped by their dad. And that was a lie, and she didn't come in and testify about that. What she testified about is that they asked her to lie for them. And there was another witness who was also asked to lie about a different aspect of the case. So even when this all was occurring during the jury trial, Eric and Lyle were asking at least two people that we know of to lie for them at the trial. And that does make the other testimony that they introduced regarding molestation a little bit suspect. And certainly that is, I think, why Mr. Anderson doesn't believe that it's true. During the second trial, where there was still quite a bit of evidence that came in about this claimed molestation, apparently the jury didn't believe it, and it didn't rise to the level of any kind of a defense that could be used in the trial. So at this point in time for resentencing, the law regarding resentencing is that if a person was abused when they were a child, that can be a consideration for the district attorney to use in terms of a resentencing. So the issue is that legitimate evidence? And what I can say is, even as Mr. Gascon has said, there is apparently quite a bit of differing opinion in the district attorney's office. And what is most upsetting is that what he announced yesterday is that he had only made his decision an hour before the press conference that he called 11 days before his reelection, or the reelection for district attorney. And so it would appear as though really this was a politically driven stunt by him to try to get cameras on him just a few days before the election. And justice should never be about politics. It should never be about a district attorney trying to get people to vote one way or the other. And what is unfortunate is that he, over the last 17 months, has apparently not really known enough about the case to be able to speak to the people who have been involved in looking at the facts and the law and the evidence to be able to come to a consensus. And that is a failure in leadership on his part. And politics should not play a role in the criminal justice system.
Well, I think that's a good point. But if I'm being, completely honest, people could accuse you of the same thing, of playing politics. You retired from the office just before Gascon became DA. You were clearly disappointed with his policies when he came in. You came out of retirement. I think you spearheaded two attempts to recall him. So is it fair for others to claim the same thing about you, that you're jumping on this case to play politics against Gascon?
Well, I don't ever jump on any case. I only get involved in cases where victims contact me and say that they are feeling that they're not being treated well in the system because of Gascon's policies, and they ask if I can please come in and try to help them. And so it's been my honor and privilege to be able to help over 200 murder victims' families over the last 4 years, for which I have received no compensation whatsoever. So I wasn't the one who tried tried to bring this to the public's attention. I wasn't the one who called press conferences and said that I was going to be coming in and doing things. I am responding when victims contact me to say that they feel like their rights are being violated, and is there anything that they can do about it? So other people can say what they want, but that is what I've done over the last 4 years.
So I read the amicus brief top to bottom, and it is scathing. I mean, I can feel through your legalese, I can feel the anger and the frustration of your client, Milton Anderson, feeling as though he's been ignored, that he finds things out via the media as opposed to a contact from the DA's office, learning this yesterday, like everybody else who is a viewer. Does he plan, if a judge decides to give this a hearing, because a judge doesn't have to give this a hearing, right? But if the judge does give this a hearing, does he plan to speak at such a hearing?
I don't know. He does live out of state. He is 90 years old. I don't know if he would plan to attend in person or if he would ask for me to speak on his behalf. That is what he has done up to this point in time, and certainly I would be honored to do so. So I don't know if he plans on coming in person, or, there is now an opportunity to participate via WebEx if the court should allow that. So I don't know if he would choose to do that or just ask me to speak on his behalf. And I would say he doesn't feel...
You know what? I want to go one step further, because if the judge does grant a resentencing, it goes to the parole board. Would you and your client then petition the parole board? And then after that, if it clears the parole board, petition the governor, Gavin Newsom?
Well, if it goes to a parole hearing, hopefully by then, LA County will have a different district attorney, because Gascon does not ever allow prosecutors to attend parole hearings, which really leaves victims kind of without any direction and not knowing what's going on. So I have assisted victims in parole hearings, for instance, rape victims who have to face their rapist. I've helped them since Gascon won't. And should that happen, hopefully by the time a parole hearing is set, there will be a new DA, and prosecutors will once again be attending parole hearings. I only came out of retirement because prosecutors were in a position of not being able to essentially do what they would normally do because of Gascon's policies. So if that happened, hopefully there will be a DA who's appearing at that time at the parole hearing.
And if not, and if Gascon prevails, the question remains, will your client, even if he's unable to bring you along, will he petition a parole board to fight their release?
Well, it's not really petitioning, but he would have a right to be heard at the parole hearing, as would other family members. And he certainly could submit a statement or attend the parole hearing and then provide a victim impact statement. He's right. I don't know. I haven't spoken with him about that.
Baby steps. We have a lot of steps to go before then. Kathy, Katie, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Still to come, it is one thing to follow the news or Netflix and form an opinion, but it's quite another to follow the testimony and the arguments and the exhibits in the courtroom and vote guilty or not guilty. That is what jurors do. And that's what juror number 9 did in the first Menendez trial. So how does she feel about the plan to resentence the brothers now? Well, she's going to tell me. She joins me exclusively next. People who sit on juries, they take that experience with them for life. And that is certainly what Hazel Thornton did. She sat in judgment during the trial of Eric and Lyle Menendez back in 1993 when the juries deadlocked. The women believed the brothers were sexually abused. The men did not. And that is something that the DA acknowledged yesterday.
I think that often, for cultural reasons, we don't believe victims of sexual assault, whether they're women, whether they're men. We saw in our first trial, which, by the way, they were tried twice. The first trial hung, meaning the jury could not come to a conclusion, and in fact, about half of the jury wanted to convict them of manslaughter, which, if that were have been the case, they would have been off prison a long time ago.
Hazel Thornton is back with us for this exclusive interview tonight. She was juror number 9, and she wrote a book about her experience called Hung Jury, the Diary of a Menendez Juror. Hazel, thanks for coming back on the program. I just wanted to get your reaction to the announcement yesterday that George Gascon made about the resentencing.
I would like for it to have been manslaughter with time served, but I understand why he went with murder and life with the possibility of parole. That's better than life with with no possibility of parole. So, you know, yesterday I was a little surprised to hear Gascon say the recommendation to the judge is 50 to life. Because I guess the cover here is that there is this now amended code in California that says anyone under 26 doesn't get that 50 to life, and that the Menendez brothers would be eligible for parole now. How did you feel about this this request for 50 to life? Did that shock you? Did you want it to be less than that? Does it matter one way or the other? It does matter. I wanted them to be eligible to leave prison now with time served, with 35 years served. But if he's got so many problems in his office with people opposing him, then I think that he needed to call it murder in order to even go forward with a resentencing. And a resentencing, in my mind, is far better than a new trial. Yeah, and the net effect is that whether it's 50 to life or not, that little catch-all under age 26, allows them to seek parole now, time served. I do want to ask you this. If they do prevail with this judge, if they do prevail with the parole board, and if they do get out, do you want to talk to them? Well, I can talk to them now if I want to, but sure. Do you want to meet up with them? This is not my burning desire to socialize with the Menendez brothers, but I would not oppose it. Sure, I'd like to talk to them. They're nice guys. Yeah, it's not about socializing with them. I just wonder, after all these years and your involvement in the case, if you would want to have a sit down and talk to them face to face about all the experiences that you've been through and that they've been through. Sure. I think that would be great. So what do you think about their uncle Milton Anderson, 90 years old, Kitty Menendez's brother, putting together this amicus brief to fight this? He's the only one left. His brother Brian also opposed this and didn't believe the boys' story that they were molested, but he died in 2017. What do you think about Uncle Milton and his thoughts about all of this as a crime victim's family member? I think that he is the same as all the guys were back 30 years ago in terms of not believing that a father could molest his sons. And I also think that we're putting far too much attention on the sexual abuse, because people say, well, there's no proof of that, they made it up. Well, you know what there is proof of? There's a lot of proof of physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. And there were over 50 witnesses to testify to those things that they saw and that they observed. And there were expert witnesses to testify to how even with just those types of abuse, how a child could be in fear of their parents, eventually, being raised that way. So I think that what people also, the flip side of that is that it was never up to the defense to prove abuse. It was up to the prosecution to prove the elements of murder. And all of the evidence that they have of murder are circumstantial and could be interpreted either in light of their being guilty of murder or in light of their being in fear of their lives and trying to save their lives. For example, they lied about it afterwards. Well, if the police came and they didn't test you for gunshot residue and they're not suspecting you,
try to get away with it. I mean, you don't have to have planned it to be lying about it afterwards. You don't have to be planning it.
There are a lot of different elements that people watching may feel very strongly about this, but they're not in the actual courtroom. You were. You lived through the trial. You were the person who this case was presented to, and you certainly have a legitimate point of view. Hazel, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you. I'll give your book another plug. It's called Hung Jury, The Diary of a Menendez Juror. Coming up next. Oh, to be a fly on the wall in whatever holding cell Sarah Boone has been in, because boy, did she get bad news today. I can't wait to hear what it was like in that courtroom when just after an hour and a half, the words guilty rang out. Reports on it next. Breaking news tonight, a verdict in the Suitcase murder trial. Sarah Boone guilty of second-degree murder for killing George Torres. The jury got the case just after 7 o'clock Eastern tonight, and less than 90 minutes later, she was pronounced guilty in that courtroom. To be precise, 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 38 seconds later. And here is the moment of truth.
In the Circuit Court of the 9th Judicial Circuit in Orange County, Florida, case number 2020 CF 2603, the state of Florida versus Sarah Boone. The verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree as charged in the information. So say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 25th day of October 2024. The form has been signed by the holders.
And that's that. This case was all about this. That video that she shot on her cell phone, taunting George Torres as he died, trapped in that suitcase, suffocating. But it may also have come down to some other video that the jury got to see just this morning. A body cam from a 2018 domestic abuse case in which both Sarah and George were arrested. And on the tape, you can hear Sarah coaching George on what to say to the judge to get the charges against her dropped.
She's the one that hit me, and I'm the one that just liked her.
Well, let me just get down to the bottom of it, okay?
I'm going to go to court and I'm going to tell the judge, listen, my fiance has nothing to do with this. It's all my fault. We were both drinking and got out of hand. It's an isolated situation that has never happened before. I love my fiance. She's a good woman. For being in trouble in her life, she has a 7-year-old son that she loves and cherishes.
A blind Boston Terrier.
She has 2 dogs. One is blind and one is deaf. She goes around and she's driving and sees an animal that's injured. She'll stop in the middle of the street, no matter what kind of traffic it is, just to make sure that that animal doesn't get injured any more than where it already has. We both love each other. We both live together. Yes, every relationship has their arguments. But we are not the type of people that you guys are portraying us to be.
She especially. Especially
her. So please, if you can, dismiss this case.
Closed.
Drop it. She is not the type of person.
Good person.
Great person.
Angel.
I know she'd be an angel. She's close to it.
Best thing that has ever happened to you.
Yes, ma'am. And I love you to death.
You did love her to death. I want to bring in Gigi McKelvey. She's the host of Pretty Lies and Alibis podcast. That just gives me the chills. I love her to death, literally. I guess this verdict wasn't surprising.
No, I mean, this woman's 50 shades of gray, Ashleigh. She is just, it's outrageous. Been through how many attorneys? I think this is number 9. But here's the thing. She was her own undoing. She recorded, literally, this man suffocating to death, and that's what convicted her.
Imagine if she had taken the deal, Gigi. She was given a week ago 15 years, and she said no, like she thought she could win this thing. Now she's facing a minimum of 22.5 to life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think she really did convince herself that this jury would see her as the victim, even though she's on trial for killing another person. I think that's just how she thinks. It's been a pattern with her. And, you know, yesterday at the end of closings for the state, they started showing this body cam footage, and I thought, this is not good. You're showing him getting arrested. But as it went on, you saw this pattern where she was perfect and she was constantly berating George. It's almost like, to me, he was the battered spouse, and really he was, because he lost his life in the end.
You know, at some point today, George Torres's mom stormed out of the courtroom, and it was almost like a mistrial, but the judge moved ahead. Is she doing okay?
From everything I hear, it was during the time where the state was showing the video of her son literally suffocating to death in that suitcase. It's understandable. They knew the video was coming, but I guess knowing it's coming and maybe she hasn't watched it before, as a mother, I can't imagine. So I understand that, but
it makes me
wasn't
sick.
An audible.
Yep.
It was not an audible outburst. It was just she got up and left.
Right. I just can't stand watching it. Gigi McKelvey, always good to see you. Thank you for this. Pretty Lies and Alibis, folks. Get it. It's great. See you soon.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, blame it on the movie. But do the fortunes of another duo, maybe they're on the rise, on the coattails of the Menendez saga? How Eric and Lyle are bringing their history back from the brink. And girl, you know it's true. Showbiz scandals, few can top Milli Vanilli. More than 35 years ago, that German pop duo was outed for lip-syncing their songs. They were canceled overnight. Decades before that was a thing. And now they're uncanceled. For the past month, Milli Vanilli has been one of the hottest music acts in the world. And they have the Menendez brothers to thank for it. Several of the group's songs were featured in the Netflix series Monsters, and now fans can't seem to get enough. Sales of the band's music have jumped 114% since the series dropped, and their songs are on multiple charts in dozens of countries. And it's not just older fans reminiscing. Blame It on the Rain and Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You both entered the top 40 on Billboard's TikTok music chart, which tracks the songs influencers use in their videos. But aren't those TikTokers lip-syncing too? AKA Milli Vanilli, way ahead of their time. That does it for us this week. Cuomo starts now. Have a good weekend.
Chris Cuomo here. Thank you for joining me on NewsNation. We have breaking news on our watch. Israel is retaliating against the extreme Islamist regime in Iran. Remember, Iran launching 200 ballistic missiles. Really, it's the regime. You can't blame the people of Iran.